Hey, Kiana, I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself. My sister-in-law, Harrison's
Yes.
sister.
All right. So I'm Kiana Jackson. I am, wow, I don't even know how to describe myself. I don't know what. Okay, let's start. Who am I? I currently reside in Detroit, Michigan, but I am from Silver Spring, Maryland. I moved here because I have a job at General Motors as an electrical engineer. I went to Virginia Commonwealth University, and that's it. Yeah.
We're going to talk about representation and why it matters, and kind of like what your experiences have been, especially being a Black woman engineer, which is a predominantly white male field. And you were in a viral e-news post for your graduating with your degree in engineering. And I feel like that post is what made me really realize how much people just like don't get it and understand like at all of why representation matters, and even were offended about they, like, people were so offended and upset about that post. And that's why I just feel like this conversation is important. And then I feel like I just really casually said viral e-news post.
I had just went on Twitter and I posted my graduation pictures, and I just happened to mention the stats of, how many Black women there was in my program. So I was one of 4 Black women in my electrical engineering program. And that was just something that I mentioned in my tweet. And that kind of blew up on Twitter, but then someone from the news reached out to me, and then it went from there, and then E! News posted it, and it went absolutely insane. And I got a lot of positive, feedback from that, and a lot of congratulations. I mean, graduating is a big deal. But then there was the negative side of people mad that I mentioned the stats. And I think like it triggered a lot of people, and mainly in that like they felt, well, I mean, when I graduated, I didn't say how many white people what I graduated with. And it's like, I mean, yeah, because if you said I was one of 150 in my graduating class, that doesn't, if you're always the majority, you don't recognize what it looks like to be a minority.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wanted that to be known, one, to fill that gap. Like, I hope that come time that I'm a manager or higher up in my field, that there's more Black people and Black women in my field. And those stats are really important because the discrepancy is large. It is so large. And it's amazing to me because more women graduate from college than men.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like when you look in the workforce, I don't see that. And especially when it comes to engineering, that gap is largely wider. So, I think those numbers are important. And that post was really big because I wanted little Black girls to see that and be like, hey, I can be an engineer one day, or what is she doing? What is that? And know that like, even though you're going to be the minority, that's okay. You can still help along and make us maybe not the majority, but let's equalize everything,
Yeah.
let's make these positions represent what our country looks like.
Yeah. And you did get outreach from people with kids too, and people.
From like Nigeria was reaching out to me,
Oh,
and like just little girls from all over the globe. I was like literally sending videos to these little girls, just like, keep going.
that's
I
so.
know, like, and they're like, I love math. And I was like, that's good, keep loving math. So it was like, it really warmed my heart because I wasn't expecting it to blow up the way that it did. But I'm glad that I made an impact on a
Yeah.
couple of girls' lives. Like, and those are just the ones that reached out to me. I don't even know how many, people talked offline about the situation.
What do you think are some of the big contributors to the gap that's in, I mean, I guess in engineering or in the workforce in general?
I mean, it stems from these companies and them hiring people of color. Because actually crazy. I saw it on Twitter. And so of course, Twitter is not always a credible source, but the person tweeting was a Black woman who was hired by Google to bring in Black employees into the
Mm-hmm.
Google company and engineering in particular. Google fired her
Mhm.
because they didn't like what she was doing and how she was calling out people for kind of, what's the word? Um, Looking at HBCUs as lesser than universities. And she was trying, her whole purpose of her job was to bring in more people from HBCUs into Google. And they fired her because they didn't like her calling them out.
Mhm.
And that right there just shows you a lot of companies are trying to do this whole diversity inclusion. You can talk the talk, but it's really about what you're actually doing, what you're actually about, you actually going out there. And that's the first issue. But I think even farther than that is just the knowledge of engineering even being an option for some of these people of color. Engineering only kind of came to me because I Googled it. In my high
Mhm.
school, no one really talked about engineering as an option. I really just Googled um, highest paying jobs in 2014. Yes. And in 2014, because my mom always told me you have a very expensive taste, so you're gonna need to get a good job. So I was like, I don't know what I'm gonna do. And so I Googled highest paying jobs in 2014. It was a biomedical engineer. And
Oh, and that's what you started out in, right?
that's what I started out in. Yes, I went to VCU to study biomedical engineering. But after my first year, I realized I didn't like it too much. And my only black professor and then black woman professor at the time, she taught my circuits class. She was an electrical engineer. And when I told her I wasn't really feeling biomedical, she was like, just go to electrical. I'm going to get you right. Just go ahead and go to electrical. And I was like, no, okay. And that's how it went there. But the fact that some high schools, they don't express that. That's not a lot of engineering classes aren't, taught. They have art, and science, but engineering was left off when, depending on what school you go to. Some schools, they have magnet programs that are built for that, but 9 times out of 10, Black students aren't going to these magnet programs. So I feel like if we can bring those programs out to, predominantly Black um, elementary, middle, and high schools, that could, bring up the pipeline for them to even have an
Mhm.
interest to know that that's an option. Yeah, it was hard. I actually had one of my first memories of really recognizing, like, I mean, of course you walk in and you're like, where are the people of color at? Like, they're
Yeah.
not there. But, where it really hit me one time was it was my first day in lab in one of my programming classes. And we had to partner up. No one wanted to work with me. I mean, I literally was like, hey, can we be partners? It was like, no, I think I'm gonna work with that guy over there. Like, I hadn't even spoken to the person. So like people were already grouping up, and the only person that wanted to work with me was the other girl in the room.
Dang.
And she was a white girl. And I mean, I feel like I wasn't even like, I was kind of like last pick of the draw, And I mean, she was a great person. We had a good time. We did what we had to do in that lab. But I thought it was insane how it was like boys club. All the
Mhm.
guys got together, and then you left the two minorities out to work for themselves.
Dang.
And I
Yeah.
really, at that point, I was like, okay. And I hate looking back at it. It's really terrible, but I had to prove myself like time and time again, which I should have never had to. And I remember the first time where my counterparts kind of looked at me as, oh, she might know what she's doing. Was I remember it was the first test grade we got back in one of my classes. And they love engineers. They love to brag, especially electrical engineers. They're weird, but they love to brag. And so the professor is like passing back the test. This guy's, oh, I got a 95, and people yelling across what they got. They're doing so well. And the professor passed back to me, and they were like, good job, Kiana. Oh, their ears went up. They looked back.
Mhm.
Oh, well, what'd you get? I was like, 99. Until they knew that I was getting better grades than them, they started, hey, do you want to come to our, oh, we're doing homework together. You want to join us? So we're going to study for the next exam next week. You want to, oh, now I'm invited to the party because you know that I'm smarter than you.
Mhm.
And it takes that proving for them to be like, oh, I guess she does know what she's doing.
Mhm.
I should have never had to do that, but I did.
Right. Because I mean, was it all the other guys in their group? or just automatically had an invite into the study group, and then one, but you had to prove yourself to get into it.
But I had to prove myself. Yeah.
Man. And even just thinking about how much more, I guess, like opportunity they have by having that as that group that they were in. Like if one of them is struggling with something, they have a group that can help them get through it. Whereas you were just like, it sounds like kind of left out on your own to
Yeah,
figure it out yourself.
I really was. And my only like groups that was helpful was NSBE, and that's the National Society of Black Engineers. And its whole purpose is to be there for you academically when others aren't.
Mm.
And that was my first group of, and not everyone in NSBE, there's few electrical engineers within NSBE because there's not that many Black people pursuing electrical engineering. There's a lot more people in mechanical, but mechanical is a larger type of engineering as opposed to electrical. But you kind of had to fend for yourself in terms of with your class, and I had to like outsource to get help as opposed to everyone in the class kind of already created cliques and groups, and I found myself like, hey, can I work with you guys? And people were just like, I mean, I guess. So we already started our studying, maybe next time. And it took for them to see that I knew what I was talking about to be invited to those things.
And I feel like for a lot of people, I think it would be hard to stick it out in a situation like that. And also like you're so outgoing, and also I think you're more resilient. I mean, I'm biased towards you, but I think that you're like more resilient than a lot of people I know. And so if people don't have that like internal thing that you have, like how do they stick through a program like that?
And a lot of my Black counterparts didn't stick through.
Oh, really?
They would go to business. It was very common for a lot of engineering, and then after the freshman year, go to business side or go to math or change to biology. It was we'd start off well, but after that freshman year, drop off really
Man.
fast. And I think it has a lot to do with that like resilience that you said, not having a lot like a group that wants to work with you. And that'd make anyone be like, well, what the heck am I doing this for? Why? I
Yeah.
mean, I feel like I can't get help. My professors have a certain demeanor towards me. That's a whole nother discussion with professors, but just your own counterparts not being there for you is really, I think, had a lot to do with the decline of Black students in engineering. Double minority is a weird place to be, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So what you're saying the solution is to make it more of an option for more people. Do you think there are other solutions or other things that would help more people stay in that field?
Having people that look like you teach you
Mm.
matters a lot. Like, I honestly don't know. Like, Dr. Hargreaves was the Black woman professor I was talking about. If it wasn't for her, I honestly don't know how far I could have made it. I mean,
Wow.
I would have tried, but like without her assistance, like late nights in her office helping me, and as well as I had another professor woman, my only other woman professor. Um, she was amazing. She was helping me in classes that she wasn't teaching me. She was not that
Wow.
professor, but she took her time to assist me in that because her counterparts were teaching me properly, and
Mhm.
I think having people that look like you in just a little bit can go so far in staying in a program.
Yeah.
I truly believe that.
And then do you see the same things like in the workforce now? Is there like similar beyond your education
Yeah.
experience?
No, I believe for sure. I mean, I would say like it's definitely a blessing. General Motors is doing, I think, pretty well in comparison to other companies in their diversity and inclusion. That's something that they've harped a lot on since I've started working. And I think that they're really trying to do a better job of hiring people of color in higher positions.
Mm.
Just seeing people of color in those positions it allows people like me to be like, okay, well, I can be in that spot one day, you know?
Mhm. Mhm.
And those people that I see, I want to reach out. Like I reach out to them. So I
Yeah.
think it's really impactful in seeing them in those positions. And it's just kind of like, in school, once you see people in the position of power that look like you, it seems more obtainable.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting that you're mentioning that they're hiring people in the higher positions too, because a lot of times I feel like over the last year we've seen all these companies come out with their stats and it's like we're 50% minority, but then when you look at their leadership and their C level, it is like 100% white. You look at their board, it's very white. And I think you and I talked about this before. I feel like we did about why it matters to have managers maybe who aren't all white, because even I've had people talk to me about like I'm white and I manage black people, but I don't know how to give them feedback because I'm afraid I'm going to sound a certain way. So instead of giving them any feedback because it's constructive or might be negative, they just don't give them anything. And so then these people are being held back from
Yeah.
moving
Yeah.
up because they're not able to like fix what they need to fix.
Yeah.
And I mean, there are a lot of solutions to that. That's like training, that's hiring people who are better at managing, but that's also having more diverse leadership so
Yeah.
that there can be more voices in the room about how we manage people and manage situations.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. It would ease so much if there were just more diversity in the higher positions.
Mhm.
Because if at the top level is nothing but white men, you're not getting a broad spectrum of what the people are like, how to manage them, how they're acting, why they're acting the way they're acting, how to best communicate with the people below you, if all
Mhm.
you know is the mindset of just the people in your room.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And how to support that is like now more than ever is how do we support people who don't, who aren't your white employees. Like during our civil rights summer, there were different people were having different experiences all summer that were bleeding into work, which is completely warranted. It was things that were happening over the summer were such a big deal. But when it's all white leadership, it's easy. It was easy for a lot of leaders to just say like, well, we can't get political, so we've got to just stay quiet about this. But if you had one person who was even close to an experience over the summer, then, I think there would have been a lot better responses from a lot of companies.
Yeah.
And, so even just in during COVID, because different communities are so differently impacted, and how do you support your employees if you don't have any idea or per concept of what your different types of employees are dealing with? Like I just feel like there's so many reasons that you have to have diversity at the top. Thinking about that and intentionally bringing in diverse leadership versus tokenizing people. Like,
But in the grand scheme of things, companies aren't trying to write off checks to people that aren't going to build their company.
mhm,
So yes, maybe it looks great that this person that we're hiring is black, but they do bring the qualities needed for the success of our company.
mhm,
So that whole concept of being that token black person or token woman or whatever, it can't be as big as a thing as we think, because the knowledge is needed from that person regardless. So
mhm.
they're not just wasting it on a name.
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess to overall, I think it's important to acknowledge the discrepancy in the numbers. To act like it's not there isn't productive by any means, because we can look at the numbers. You can look with your eyes in these companies that, Black talent is not there in STEM. Um, and I think acknowledging it and putting an emphasis on that, acknowledging that it's an issue, is a very good start. And seeing like, hey, when I look around the office, does everyone look like me? And if they do, how can I fix that? How can I bring it up to the people in my room? And how is that affecting how I look at the workplace and how I do business?
Mhm.
Because if everyone in the room looks like you, it's very possible that everyone in the room thinks like you because it's a similar mindset. Is that productive to the work you're doing and to what you're bringing to the table? And I think that once you recognize that and try to think about what's going on, I think that'll enable you to say, hey, why why is that the case, and how can I bring this to management, to leadership? And if you are the leadership, how can you change that?
Yeah.
And I think just that acknowledging it is the first big step, in anything. And so once you kind of see that this is a problem, I am possibly contributing to this problem. What can I do better, to fix that? And that's why I just think that that's the first step that anyone can take in that. Um, yeah, yeah.